'neath thy broad blue sky, to thee, O Lord, thy children cry, thy needy creatures on thee call, for thou art great and good to all. Awake, ye sons of toil or sleep, 1,000,000 serve, 1,000,000 weep. Demand your rights, let tyrants see. You are resolved that you'll be free.
Part 2. Reading. Respected friends, I am accused of fostering agitation. The London Times calls me a fool and a malcontent. Now there's a thing that a humble working woman should be noticed by the gentleman's paper of choice. Well, let me tell you this, my friends. I haven't slept for 2 solid nights in succession, and I can honestly tell you I heartily hate agitation. The time these masters only open our mills and give us our rights.
Friends and fellow operatives, who is that man? That working man? Who? Haven't seen you subscribe to the United Aggregate Union, turns a traitor to our godly cause for freedom and for rights. He who is not ashamed to show to you the dastardly and humiliating avowal of standing aloof and will not join us in our fight for freedom and for rights.
Settle down now. Stephen. What have you to say for yourself, lad? Now let's have some quiet and listen to the man speak. Let's hear what you have to say, Stephen.
My friends, I've heard what's been spoken about me, and 'tis likely that I shan't mend it. But I am the one single-handed band of this mill who don't come in with proposed regulations. I can't come in with them, my friends. I doubt they'll do you any good. More like they'll do you hurt.
Stephen Blackpool! Think on it again, lad. For that's shunned by all our friends.
I have thought on it, and more than a bit, sir. But I simply can't come in. I must go the way that lays afore me. I've passed a promise on the matter, and I shall leave you.
Traitor.
You call me traitor? So, let be. I make no complaint about being turned to the wall or outcast from this time forward. But I hope I shall be let to work. If there's any right at all for me, my friends, then it's that.
Thus did Stephen Blackpool enter into the loneliest of lives, that of solitude among a familiar crowd. By general consent, they even avoided that side of the road on which he habitually walked, and left it to him only.
Bitzer, ladies and gentlemen, the horse definer. The grown-up Bitzer held now the very respectable office of General Spy and Informer in the bank, whence Mrs. Sparsit had been removed after a change in her employer's domestic arrangements.
What are the restless wretches doing now, Bitzer?
United as a body of workers, ma'am, and engaging to stand by one another.
A union? I do not pretend to understand these things. I only know that these people must be conquered. And it's high time it was done, once and for all.
Yes, ma'am.
These hands would do well to take example by you, Bitzer.
As for their wanting recreations, ma'am, it's stuffy nonsense. I don't want recreations. I never did. Why should they?
Because they are improvident.
Yes, ma'am.
The clerks are trustworthy, punctual and industrious, of course.
Yes, ma'am, pretty fair with the usual exception.
Ah.
Master Thomas, ma'am, I doubt Master Thomas very much. I don't like his ways at all. He is a dissipated, extravagant idler. He's not worth his salt, man.
Good gracious, what anyone could want at the bank at this time of the evening. Use your own discretion, Bitzer.
This gentleman, Mr. James Harthouse, had recently been recruited into politics by the party of Mr. Grant.
It was to be seen with half an eye that he was a thorough gentleman, made to the very model of the time, weary of everything, and putting no more faith in anything than Lucifer.
He tried life as a cornet of dragoons and found it.
A bore.
So then he went walking to Jerusalem.
Got bored there.
So then he decided to go yachting around the world.
Got bored everywhere. His honourable and jocular brother said one day,
Jen, there's a good opening among the hard, fat fellows, and they want men. I wonder you don't go in for statistics.
Jem, rather taken by the novelty of the idea, was ready to go in for statistics as for anything else.
And so, he went in.
Then, after a few dashes in the public meeting way, Mr. Gradgrind approved of Jem, and he was sent down to Coketown to become known.
If you please, man, this gentleman wished to see you.
Very well, Bitzer. I believe, sir, you wish to see me.
I do beg your pardon, ma'am.
Please to be seated, sir.
Allow me, ma'am. Exceedingly odd place. Will you allow me to ask, is it always as black as this?
In general, much blacker.
Is it possible? Oh, excuse me. You're not a native, I think.
No, sir. It was once my good fortune to move in a very different sphere. But I have long adapted myself to the governing power of my life.
Very philosophical. Very exemplary. Laudable.
May I be permitted to ask, sir, to what I am indebted for the favour of this?
Assuredly, much obliged to you for reminding me. I have a letter of introduction to Mr. Bounderby the banker. I asked a fellow whom I met, one of the working people, where Mr. Bounderby the banker might reside. The fellow appeared to have taken a bath in something fluffy.
The raw material.
Misled, no doubt, by the word bank, he directed me to this edifice. I assume Mr. Bounderby does not reside here. Now, my letter of introduction. Here it is. It is from Gradgrind, the Member of Parliament for this place, whom I had the pleasure of knowing in London.
Oh, I recognise the hand. Any further confirmation will be quite unnecessary.
1,000 thanks.
Bitzer! You will make arrangements for this gentleman to visit Mr. Bounderby presently.
I believe he married Gradgrind's daughter.
Yes, he had that honour.
Is the lady so very alarming? I'm a burning desire to know. Is she absolutely unapproachable, repellently and stunningly clever? I see by your meaning smile you think not. You've poured balm into my anxious soul. Number of age, 40, 5 and 30.
A chit, not 20 when she was married.
I promise I was never so astonished in all my life.
There's a carriage at the door, sir.
Pray excuse my intrusion. Many thanks, good day.
Coketown, sir, is not the kind of place we've been accustomed to. Therefore, I'll tell you something about it before we go any further.
I would be charmed, sir.
I wouldn't be too sure on that. Now, you've had a lot of talk about the work in our nose, no doubt. You have? Very good. Now I'll state the fact of it to you. It's the pleasantest work there is. It's the lightest work there is. And it's the best paid work there is. Other than that, we couldn't improve the nose ourselves unless we laid down Turkish carpets on the floors. Which we're not going to do.
Mr. Bounderby, perfectly right.
Ah! Perhaps you know I married Tony Gradgrind's daughter.
So I do.
So this is my wife, Mrs. Bounderby. Lou, this is Mr. James Harthouse, a friend of your father's from London.
Sir, I've heard you're going to devote yourself to the service of your country. You've made up your mind to show the nation the way out of all its difficulties.
I'll make no such pretense to you, Mrs. Bounderby. I've gone in for your respected father's opinions, really because I have no choice of opinions. I may as well go in for them as anything else.
Have you none of your own?
I've not so much as the slightest predilection left.
You are a singular politician.
Good! Well, there we are.
Tommy!
Ah, Thomas! Louise's younger brother. Currently in my employ at the bank. When I was your age, young Tom, I was punctual, or I got no dinner.
When you were my age, you hadn't a wrong balance to get it right, and you hadn't to dress afterwards.
Never you mind that now.
Mrs. Bounderby, your brother's face is quite familiar to me. Might I have seen him abroad?
No, Tom has never been abroad. Tom, love, I'm just telling Mr. Harthouse that he never saw you abroad.
No such luck.
I wonder, sir, as I'm now acquainted with the history, economics, and architecture of Coketown, whether you would be kind enough to escort me to my hotel. It is almost 8:30, and I worry if we're late, Mr. Bounderby shall have to dine on air.
Certainly.
You, sir, have done me a great honour today with your company. I should not wish to inconvenience you any further.
I sincerely hope, sir, that my all too humble origin should not preclude any kind of friendship between us. We are of a mind on many important issues, I believe.
Nothing would please me more, sir. Good night. Mrs. Bounderby. A delight.
Sir? The hotels.
Oh, hang that. The air here is unusual. I should like to take more of it in the hope that it might prove reviving. Do you smoke?
Thank you. If you think the air's strange here, Mr. Hardhouse, you should come down to the river. The water is dyed black and gives off an odour that can scarce be described by any man alive.
What a comical brother-in-law you are, Tom.
What a comical brother-in-law Bounderby is, I think you mean.
Tom, you are a piece of caustic.
I don't care for Bounderby. I'm not going to begin to be polite now. It will be rather late in the day.
Well, don't mind me, but be careful when his wife is by. You know.
His wife? My sister. Oh yes, you never cared for Bounderby.
You don't mean it.
I do, upon my honour. Why, you won't tell me, Mr. Hardhouse, that you really do suppose my sister Lou does care for Bounderby?
My dear fellow, what am I bound to suppose when I see two married people living in harmony and happiness?
You know my father, Mr. Hardhouse, therefore you needn't be surprised that Lou married old Bounderby. He proposed and she accepted, but she wouldn't have been as dutiful if it wasn't for me. I was stuck into old Bounderby's bank, where I never wanted to be, and I knew I should get into all manner of scrapes there. She pulled old Bounderby's pipe out. So I told her my wishes, and she came into them. She will do anything for me. It's very game of her, wasn't it?
Very interesting. Your dutiful sister. And she gets on so placidly.
Louisa was the most remarkable girl Mr. James Harthouse had ever seen. She was so reserved and yet so watchful, so constrained and yet so careless, and so cold and proud, and yet so sensitively ashamed of her husband. It was quite a new sensation to observe her.
Your name's Blackpool, ain't it?
Yes.
You are the factory hand they sent to Coventry, I mean.
Yes.
Mr. Boundary wants to speak to you. You know his house, don't you?
Yes.
Then go straight up there, will you? You're expected.
Now, Stephen, what's this I hear? What have these pests of the earth been doing to you, huh? This is the man I was telling you about, Harthouse. Come on then, lad, speak up.
What were it, sir, you were pleased to want with me?
I've just told you. Tell us about yourself and this combination, this union.
With your pardon, sir, I've naught to say of it.
Ah, get that Harthouse there. Here's a specimen. When this man was here once before, I warned this man against mischievous strangers who are always about and ought to be hanged whenever they're found. And I told this man then he was headed in the wrong direction. Now would you believe it? That of all they had put this mark upon him, he's such a slave to them still, he's afraid to open his lips about them.
I said I had naught to say. I didn't say I was fearful of opening my lips.
Oh, then you better tell us at once then that there's no agitators in the town stirring up the people to mutiny, eh? The most confounded scoundrels. You better tell us all at once, eh? You can't deceive me, lad. I know you want to tell us. Why don't you?
Sir, I'm as sorry as you when people's leaders is bad.
Pray, Mr. Blackpool, may I then be so bold as to inquire why it is that you have refused to be in this combination?
Well, I've rather not come to it, but since you put the question, I will answer. I have passed a promise.
Not to me.
Oh, no, sir, not to you.
Mr. Harthouse, he knows that they are a set of rascals and rebels who transportation is too good for. Now, you've been knocking around a fair bit. Have you ever met a man like that outside of this blessed country?
Oh, no, ma'am. Not rebels. Not rascals. Now to the kind, ma'am. They're true to one another, faithful to one another, even affectionate to one another, unto death.
Excuse me, my friend. But I wouldn't mind if you could honour me with half a minute of your time, because I'd like a word or two with you as well. Now, you said just now you had nothing to tell us about this matter. You're quite sure of that before we go any further?
Sir, I'm sure of it.
Because there's a gentleman here from London present. A Parliament gentleman. And I should like him to hear a little bit of dialogue between you and me rather than take it on trust from my own lips. Now, what do you complain of?
Well, I don't come here to complain. I come because I was sent for.
What do you people, in general, complain of?
Well, it is a muddle. Look about town, as rich as it is. See as numbers of people have been brought into being here to piece out a living twixt the cradle and the grave. See how they live, and where they live, and in what numbers, and what sameness, and what chances. And see how the mills is always going and going. And look how you considers of us, and writes of us, and talks of us, and comes with your deputations of secretaries of state. You know, we are never right, and you are always right. We've never had no sin in us since we were born. It is a model, sir. Look at the mills, sir. Look how it's growing. Bigger and bigger and faster from year to year, from generation to generation. Who can look at it, sir, and fairly tell a man that it's not a model?
Of course. Now, perhaps you'd like to let this gentleman know how you would set this model, as you're so fond of calling it, to rights.
Oh, I don't know, sir. That's not for me, that's for them that's over me.
I'll tell you what, at any rate, we'll round up half a dozen of these here agitators, we'll indict the blackguards for felony and get them shipped off for penal settlements. Don't tell me you're a man! Because we will! I tell you!
Sir, if you were to take 100 agitators and sew them into separate sacks and drop them into the deepest ocean, you still leave the model just where it is. I cannot tell the gentleman what will do it, but I know that will not do it. A strong hand will never do it. Victory and triumph will never do it. Making one side unnaturally always and forever right and t'other side unnaturally always and forever wrong will never, ever do it. Not till God's work is undone.
You stop where you are. No, I know what you are. You're one of those characters, aren't you? Who's always got a grievance, and you go around sowing it and raising your crops. That's the business of your life, my friend. And you are such a waspish, raspish, ill-conditioned chap, you see, that even your own union, the men who know you best, will have nothing to do with you. And I'll tell you what, I never thought those fellows could be writing anything, but I go so far along with them that I'll have nothing to do with you either. You can finish off what you're at, and you can go elsewhere.
Sir, you know if I cannot get work with you, I cannot get it elsewhere.
What I know. And what you know. And I have nothing more to say on the matter.
God help us all.
Oh, dear me.
It was falling dark when Stephen left Mr. Bounderby's house. Nothing was further from his thoughts.
And the curious old woman he saw in Rachel's company.
Rachel, right here.
Stephen, this lady was inquiring after Mrs. Bounderby. I heard about Mr. Bounderby getting married. I read it in the paper. Oh, it was grand. It was fine, but I so want to see his wife.
I'm sorry, Mum. I have a vague remembrance of your face. Have I seen you somewhere before?
Oh, it's not likely. I live 40 miles from here. But I so wanted to see the lady. And would you believe it? She hasn't come out of that house since noon today.
I have seen her. She were young and handsome, with dark thinking eyes and a still way.
Young and handsome. And blooming like a rose. What an happy wife. Married to your master.
Not master anymore.
Have you left his work, Stephen?
His work and I are parted. And I must go from Coke down and begin afresh.
But where will you
I
go?
don't know. Would you come to my poor house, Mum, and take a cup of tea?
Stephen lighted a little candle, set out his tea board, got hot water from down below, and brought in small portions of tea, sugar, some butter, and a loaf from the nearest shop.
The bread was new and crusty, and the butter fresh, in fulfilment of the standard testimony of the Coat Town magnates that these people live like princes.
Rachel made the tea. So large a party necessitated the borrowing of a cup, and the visitor enjoyed it mightily.
I haven't thought yet, Mrs. of asking your name.
Mrs. Pegler.
Oh, widow, I think.
Oh, many a long year. My husband died before you was born.
Any children?
No. Not now. Not now. Dead Stephen.
Oh. Oh, I'm sorry I spoke with you.
I had a son, but he's not to be spoken of, if you please. I've lost him.
Rachel, it's Mrs. Bounderby with the gentleman I saw at the house.
Found me? Oh, don't let him see me. Hide me. Don't let him come up till I'm gone.
Hearken, Mrs. It ain't Mr. Bounderby, it is his wife.
Not fair, Mrs. Pegler.
But are you sure it's the lady and not the gentleman?
I'm certain.
Then take no notice of me. I'll be myself in this corner.
For the first time
In her life.
Louisa had come to the dwellings of one of the Coketown hands.
For the first time
In
her life, she came face to face with anything like individuality in connection with them.
She
knew
knew of their existence by hundreds and by thousands.
She knew what results in work a given number of them could produce in a given space of time.
She knew them in crowds passing to and from their nests like ants or beetles.
Something
That was a little pinched when wheat was dear.
And overate itself when wheat was cheap.
Something
that increased at such a rate of percentage.
And yielded such another percentage of crime.
Such another percentage of pauperism.
Something
Wholesale, which vast fortunes were made.
Something that rose up like a great sea and did some harm and waste.
Chiefly to itself.
And fell again.
This she knew the Coketown hands to be. But
She had scarcely thought more of separating them into units.
than of separating the sea itself into its component drops.
I have come to speak to you in consequence of what passed just now. I should like to be serviceable to you, if you will let me. Is this your wife? I recollect now to have heard of your domestic misfortunes spoken of. It was not my meaning to ask a question that would cause pain to anybody here. He has told you what has passed between himself and my husband.
I have heard the end of it, young lady. The chances of work are very small, young lady, for a man who gets a bad name.
What will you do?
When I'm finished up, I'm going to quit this part. Try another. There's nothing to do but try. Just lie down and die.
How will you travel?
Afoot.
A purse appeared.
Rachel, this is freely his. Will you entreat him to take it?
I cannot do that, young lady. Bless you. It is for him to know his heart and what is right according to it.
To show that I'm not a man without reason and gratitude, I'll take £2. I'll take it for tomorrow to pay back. I'll get work someday. But I'll ask you thank you this month.
Lou, before we go, I should like to speak to him a moment. Something pops into my head. If you'll step out on the stairs, Blackpool, I'll mention it. I think I can do you a good turn. Don't ask me what it is, because it might not come to anything. But there's no harm in my trying. That was our porter from the bank who gave you the message today. I belong to the bank too! Now look here, when are you off?
Friday or Saturday night, thereabout.
I tell you what, do you recognise our porter if you see him again?
Yeah, sure.
Very well. When you finish work between this and you're going away, just hang about the bank an hour or so, will you? If I find I can do you the service that I wanted you, you'll have a note or a message for you. You are sure you understand?
Yes, I understand.
You'll hang about the bank an hour or so, will you? You're all right, are you? Very well.
Mr. Bounderby had taken possession of a house and grounds called Lickett's Hall, some 15 miles from town.
This country, gradually softening towards the neighbourhood of Mr. Bounderby's retreat, there mellowed into a rustic landscape, golden with heath.
Whose name have you been carving on trees, Tom?
Whose name? Oh, you mean what girl's name? There's not much of that, Mr. Hardhouse, unless some fair creature with a slashing fortune would take a fancy to me.
Tom, I'm afraid you are mercenary.
Me? Who is it? Just ask my sister.
Have you proved it to be a failing of mine, Tom?
Well, you know whether the cap fits. If it does, you can wear it.
Tom is misanthropical today. As all we bored people are now and then. Oh, pardon me. It is a strange coincidence, us meeting young Tom this afternoon. Well, forgive me, Mrs. Bounderby, but he was to be the subject of our walk. I have an interest in him.
Have you an interest in anything, Mr. Hardhouse?
If you'd asked me when I first came to Coketown, I should have said no. But at the risk of awakening your incredulity, yes, I have an interest. Your brother, Tom.
Mr. Hardhouse, I give you credit for it.
I'm interested in him for his own sake, Mrs. Bounderby. It is no irrevocable offence in a young fellow of your brother's years if he is heedless, inconsiderate, and expensive. A little dissipated in the common phrase, is he?
Yes.
Allow me to be frank. Do you think he games at all?
I think he makes bets.
I know he does.
Of course he loses.
Yes.
Everybody does lose who bets.
May I hint at the probability of your sometimes supplying him with money for these purposes? Mrs. Bounderby, I think Tom may be gradually falling into trouble. I wish to stretch out a helping hand to him from the depths of my wicked experience. Tom has borrowed a considerable sum of you.
Heavily enough to oblige me to sell some trinkets. They were no sacrifice.
What you tell me, I feel great interest in, Mrs. Bounderby. However, I have one great fault to find with Tom, which I cannot forgive.
What fault is that, sir?
Perhaps I've said enough.
You alarm me, Mr. Hardhouse. Pray let me know it.
I cannot forgive your brother for not being more sensible in the affection and devotion of his best friend. The return he makes her, in my opinion, is a very poor one.
The wood floated before her, for her eyes were suffused with tears. They rose from a deep well long concealed, and her heart was filled with acute pain that found no relief in them.
In a word, it is to correct your brother in this, Mrs. Bounderby, that I must aspire. My advice in extricating him rather valuable, I think, as coming from a scapegrace on a much larger scale, will have some influence over him, which I intend to use. Perhaps I've said enough. I seem to be protesting that I'm some sort of good fellow, when I openly announce that I'm nothing of the sort.
Mr. Hardhouse.
Yonder among the trees, your brother loiters. Perhaps perhaps his brotherly conscience has touched him. If there are such things as consciences, I hear of them far too often to actually believe in them.
I must return to the house at once.
Stephen had overstayed his hours outside the bank on each of the first 2 evenings. Nothing had happened, good or bad.
Stephen worked the next day.
And the next.
Uncheered by a word from anyone, and shunned as before.
Tom, my fine fellow, I want to have a word with you on a matter that's close to your heart.
Me, the less we speak of me, the better, I suspect.
You've been rather solemn and doleful of late, Tom. What's the matter?
Oh, Mr. Hardhouse, I'm hard up and bothered out of my life.
My dear fellow, so am I.
You? You are the picture of independence, Mr. Hardhouse. You have no idea what a state I've got myself into.
Well, Tom, you're inconsiderate. You expect too much of your sister. You've borrowed money off her, you dog. You know you have.
How else was I to get it?
But, my dear Tom, if your sister has not got it...
I don't say she has got it, but that she could get it. It's of no use of making a secret of matters now, Mr. Hardhouse, after what I've told you already. You know she didn't marry on Bounderby for her own sake, or for his sake, but for my sake. She could manage to coax the money out of him if she chose, but no, there she sits in his company, like a stone! Instead of making herself agreeable and getting it easily. I don't know what you call this, but I call it unnatural conduct.
There was a piece of ornate water, immediate below parapet, into which Mr. James Hardhouse wanted to pit Mr. Thomas Crabcrown Jr.
But he preserved his easy attitude.
Dear Tom, let me try to be your banker.
Oh, for God's sake, don't talk about bankers! Very much obliged to you, Mr. Hardhouse. Money is of no use to me at present. You're a true friend.
Well, I may be more use by and by. If you will open your benevolence to me when they come thick upon you, I may show you better ways out than you could find for
I
yourself.
wish I'd known you sooner, Mr. Hardhouse.
Now you see, Tom, I'm desperately intent on you softening towards your sister and becoming a more loving and agreeable sort of brother, which you ought to be.
I will be, Mr. Hardhouse.
Let's unlike the present, begin at once. Now, having made our bargain, let's tear ourselves asunder till dinner time.
And so it was that when Tom appeared for dinner that very night.
I don't mean to be cross, Lou. I know you are fond of me, and you know I am fond of you.
At the end of the 3rd day, Stephen's room stood empty. And he might not be remiss in his part of the engagement, he resolved to spend the next 2 hours there, on this his 3rd and last night.
But no one had come for him. So the next morning at dawn, he left his home.
How strange to turn from the chimneys to the birds.
How strange to have the road dirt on his feet instead of the coal grit.
So strange to have lived to this time of life, yet to begin like a boy this summer morning.
He got to the top of the hill and looked back.
The trees arched over him, whispering that he'd left a true and loving heart behind.
The same morning, in another part of town,
Hardhouse! Hardhouse! Louisa! Come down here! Hardhouse! Have you heard? Hardhouse! Have you heard?
Heard what?
Then you haven't heard.
I have heard you, as has your horse, as has Macclesfield. Nothing else.
The bank is robbed!
You don't mean it.
Robbed last night, sir. Robbed in an extraordinary manner. Robbed with a false key. £250, but it's not the sum, it's the fact. It's the fact of the break being wrong. That's the important circumstance.
I hope I may be allowed at this time to congratulate you on not having sustained a greater loss.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, it might have been £20,000. There's no telling what it might have been. Some fellows got to young Tom's safe and abstracted the contents.
Is anybody suspected?
Suspected? Is anybody suspected? Josiah bound to be a coat-hound. He's not to be plundered. And nobody suspected.
Might I inquire who?
All right. I'll tell you. But this is to go no further. Strictest confidence. What would you say? To a factory hand being in it.
I hope not our friend Stephen Blackpot.
Say pool, sir, instead of pot. And that's the man.
Surely not Mr. Bounderby. Not Mr. Blackpool.
Oh, yes. They're the finest people in the world, these fellows are, aren't they? But I tell you what, you show me a dissatisfied factory hand, and I'll show you a man that's fit for anything bad. I don't care what it is.
Bounderby, are you certain in your suspicions of Stephen Blackpool? My only suspicion of him was that he seemed a decent sort.
Oh. Before he disappeared to parts unknown, he was seen night after night outside the bank. Bitzer clocked him he's lurking about, and so did the neighbours.
Well, fellows who go in for banks must take the consequences. If there were no consequences, we should all go in for banks.
And so, it pains me to say you have fallen under suspicion here, Stephen. There has been a meeting tonight, and you have been spoken of in the same shameful way. Stephen, you must come back, at furthest in 2 days, or else I fear be hunted like a hare.
Is there anything you wish to tell me? Now, if you ever loved me in your life and have anything concealed from everyone else besides, tell it to me.
I don't know what you mean, Lily. You have been dreaming.
Tom, is there nothing you wish to tell me? You can tell me nothing that will change me. Oh, Tom, tell me the truth.
I don't know what you mean, Lily.
You may be certain. You may be certain that I will not reproach you. You may be certain that I will save you at whatever the cost. Tom, is there nothing you wish to tell me? Listen, whisper very softly. Say only yes, and I shall understand you.
I don't know what you mean. Lou, you are a brave, kind girl, worthy of a better brother than I am. But I have nothing to say to you. Go to bed.
Do you believe the man I gave the money to is really implicated in this crime?
I don't see why he shouldn't be.
He seemed to me an honest man.
He may be a very good fellow for anything I know. I hope he is.
Good night, my dear. Good night. Tom, is there nothing you wish to tell me?
Lou! What should I have? Would you have me tell you a lie?
No. I wouldn't have you do that, Tom. Not tonight. Not tonight, of all the nights in your life.
I'm so tired now. Go to bed.
It startles you. You startle me.
Mrs. Bounderby, I am sorry.
It's Tom, he's...
Louisa, my dear, all shall be well. All shall be well.
My dear Miss Gregrounder, please beg your pardon. I could never think of sitting in that place under existing circumstances. It is only because you happen to be a little late, Miss Gregrounder. Oh, I am sorry. I meant to say Mrs. Bounderby.
Stop where you are, Mum. I'm sure Mrs. Bounderby will be glad to be relieved of the trouble, I believe.
Oh, don't say that, sir, because that is to be unkind to Mrs. Bounderby, and to be unkind is not to be you, sir.
You may set your mind at rest, Mum. You can take it quietly, can't you, Lou?
Of course. It is of no moment. Why should it be of any importance to me?
Why should it be of any importance to anyone, Mrs. Sparsit, Mum? You attach too much importance to things. Your own fashion, Mum. You're behind Gradgrind's children's time.
What is the matter with you? What has given you offence?
Offence? Do you think if any offence were given me, I shouldn't have it named and corrected? I'm a straightforward man, I believe. I don't go beating around for side winds.
I don't understand what you would have.
Have? Nothing. Otherwise, don't you know thoroughly well that I desire Bounderby a coat down.
You are incomprehensible this morning. Take no further trouble explaining yourself, for I'm not curious to know your meaning. What does it matter?
What?
A letter, sir, for Mrs. Bounderby.
Deliver it then!
Mr. Bounderby!
My dearest Louisa, please excuse the brevity of my note, but as you'll understand, there is virtue in my haste. It is with great sadness I have to report that your mother lies very ill. Though she's never been well, within your knowledge of it, she has declined over the last couple of days, and last night she sank further. Your earliest presence at home is imperative, I'm afraid, my dear. And Tom has come too.
Poor father.
Louisa rumbled into Gropetown.
Over the coal pits, past and present.
And was whirled into its smoky shores.
She'd seldom been there since her marriage.
She had had no inducements to go back.
Her remembrances of home and childhood were of the drying up of every spring and fountain as it gushed out of her young heart. Mrs. Bounderby.
How is my mother?
I can't call him Jay. I can call him Mr. I can't call him.
She had positively refused to take to it, on the grounds that if she did, she would never hear the last of it.
I can't call him Jay.
There was a great deal of trouble before it could be made known to her that her eldest child was there.
My dear, it was on your father's day. He set his heart upon it, and he ought to know.
I want to hear of you, Mother, not of myself.
That's something new. My willingness to hear of me. Not very well, Louisa. Very faint and giddy.
Are you in pain, Mother?
I think there's a pain somewhere in the road, but I can't be sure I've got it. I want to talk to you, my dear. Sissy, my good girl, you leave us alone for a moment.
Of course, Mum. I shall be very close. If you should want anything.
You were going to talk to me, Mother. About what?
Hey? Oh. Anyways, you must remember that whenever I spoke to you on any subject, I never heard the last of it. And consequently, I gave off saying anything at all. Oh, you had a great deal, Louisa.
and so did your brother. Ologies of all kinds, from morning to night. And if there is an ology that hasn't been worn to rags in this house, I hope I shall never hear its name.
I can hear you, Mother.
There is something, not an ology at all, that your father has missed. I don't know what it is. I'll never get its name now, but it's making me restless. I must write to him, to ask him, for God's sake, what it is. Get me a pen! Get me a pen!
It mattered little what figures of wonderful no meaning she began to trace upon her apples.
The hand soon stopped in the middle of them.
The light that had always been feeble and dim went out.
And even Mrs. Gradgrind
emerged from the shadow in which man walketh and disquieteth himself in vain.
took on the dread solemnity of the sages and patriarchs.